we do have one question that was in the chat so far, and that says, how do you handle process conditioned frass post-harvesting before using as a fertilizer? And I think Liz pretty well covered that when she went through her talk with the screens. I don't know, is there anything else you'd like to add to that, Liz?
Yeah, I can add. Generally, black soldier fly larva frass is high moisture when we harvest the larva. And when I say high moisture, maybe 20
Mm,
to 40% moisture. And so generally, BSFL frass is going to have some kind of heat processing step to remove moisture, unless you have a
mm,
very local application opportunity. It's a great fertilizer if it's in its kind of raw form, but it's going to have to be used really close because of logistics and cost of moving water. So you'll generally see black soldier fly larva frass has gone through a heat treatment of some sort. We also grind our frass, and I think many do as well, to make sure that you get a really consistent, homogeneous mix, because you do have that diversity between digested feed and exoskeletons. And I will just say there right now, there's not a lot of regulation around the requirements for processing frass. Europe, on the other hand, has some very strict requirements for kind of time and temperature processing. I think we do that more on the back end from a regulatory perspective by doing our pathogen testing to ensure that we're providing a safe product. But yeah, most frass, BSFL frass in particular, will be dried. Mealworm and cricket frass generally is drier to begin with, so it may not have quite the same requirement of drying just from a physical handling and distribution perspective.
Are there any considerations for frass storage? Like if you have to hold it over time before you're distributing it or selling it or it's getting picked up for field application?
If it is dried, no, the shelf life seems to be really, really long. It's a very shelf stable product. In its wet form, no, you better use it very, very quickly because there's a lot of
Mhm.
biological activity in it.
Do you have it like in a covered shed
Oh,
or a
ours gets,
pile
yeah,
stockpiled or?
no, ours is ground and put into super sacks or 40-pound bags or whatever its
Mm.
finished, product distribution form is going to be. So, yeah, I assume maybe, I'm sure you could move it into like a bulk tank or something like that as well and store it. But we've not had to do that. We put it into finished packaging pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have another question. Do these need to be grown indoors or could it be outside?
So I'll jump in first. I think it really depends on what your purpose is. There are a lot of people that do backyard farming with black soldier fly, and it's outdoors. That means it's seasonal, depending on your location. If you're trying to industrialize, I mean, Liz can talk about the industrialized process and climate control. So it really depends on purpose.
Yeah, I would just echo that. I mean, this is an animal that is native to virtually every continent. It does very well outside, but to Jeff's point, seasonally, and probably not as intensively. So if we want to go into more intensive agricultural systems, most producers, particularly in North America, have moved to indoor systems, just because we need to be able to farm year round, and we need that vertical farming ability as well, just to make the economics work because of the cost of production in the US and North America. There's quite a bit of open farming systems in Asia and other countries that Jeff is very familiar with.
Yeah, and I will say just on the frass side, just going back to that real quick, what happens, Liz, if you don't dry it and you put it in a sack uh, and store it?
Heat?
Heat, a whole lot of heat. Yes. So we've had one fire at our plant, and that was some wet frass that got put into a dumpster on a hot day.
Mm,
I've
right.
seen
Yeah, lots of things
frass.
to consider.
I've seen frass like lose like 50% of its volume just storing it wet. I mean, it
Mm,
keeps composting, doesn't it?
Yeah.
mm, mm. I guess what are some pros and cons of the different insect species? Like, are some good for some feedstocks and others? Yes, so far that you've seen?
Well, I'm biased. I will say that. I believe black soldier fly has so much potential because it can feed on so many different things. And its conversion rate is pretty good and it's fast, 14-day cycle or less,
Mhm.
where other insects take longer. I think the benefits of some other insects is maybe higher protein content. Uh,
Mm.
but uh, I think in terms of versatility, black soldier fly is the crown jewel of the industry.
you come in.
Agreed.
I guess maybe this is more for Liz, but is there any sort of like permitting for new facilities of this, like kind of thinking on the livestock things where a lot of states have different regulations for
Yep.
siting?
Yeah, I think that depends on the state. So I can only speak to Kentucky that we've got the commercial operation. In Kentucky, we have no environmental permitting. We went through the evaluation process with the state. And so there is consideration for things like our processing when we use a dryer, a commercial dryer with a scrubber. And so we have to check our scrubber to make sure we're not putting particulate into the air and we don't have any kind of air quality concerns. We have no water permitting because essentially we don't discharge water. The only water that gets discharged is that is kind of a the evaporative cooling that comes off of the larva. So essentially it's clean water that goes back into the city. In fact, we get a rebate for our water discharge because we're putting clean water back into the system. There's no water treatment required. So in Kentucky, we've had very favorable response and no requirement for permitting. I'm sure that's different if you're outdoors, and I'm sure that's different if you have different, there may be different states that have different regulatory checkpoints that you need to cover.
I know Amanda said you guys are doing more research on availability and so forth. Like, have you seen much for second year credits for some of the nutrients so far? Or is that just still a really new question you're working on?
Do you mean like accumulation in the soil, or what do you mean by credits?
Like, do you get a 25% of your nitrogens available in the second year, for example?
Yeah, that's still kind of ongoing. It looks kind of similar to poultry litter, but yeah, we definitely need those kind of general guidelines to be able to give farmers expectant nutrient releases after time or after the first year.
Has the USDA been able to incorporate any Frass related language in NRCS standards yet? That's still not quite there.
I'm not on the regulation side, and I think Liz would probably have a better idea of that.
That's my knowledge.
Right, the new frontier on all kinds of levels. That's
Absolutely, yeah.
That's for sure. Liz, have you been able to distribute your Frass product so far? People have been very reluctant, or are they pretty accepting of trying it so far?
I think
Kentucky?
we have nationwide distribution of our Frass at this point. I think we're registered in the 48 contiguous states. We've seen a lot of interest. I think the original interest was really on the organic side, and that took some work to basically make sure we clarified the standards with OMRI and the National Organic Standards Board. And so as we've seen the OMRI approvals and CDFA approvals come through, there's been a considerable increase in demand for organic agriculture. We have quite a bit of and from the pictures I showed, maybe it was obvious, but a lot of positive feedback on the turf and sod side, particularly because of pest pressures and kind of resilience, I think, that we're seeing. So yeah, we've had some really great traction with Frass. I think, as I mentioned, though, the testing is really important. So it's 2-3 years working with producers to make sure that we're getting consistent results and figuring out what what the best way to apply it, what particle size we really need, what can we get away with, and put the least amount of investment in the Frass so that it's the cost is the most effective for the producer. But we've seen some really great responses to Frass.
Have you been able to just send in samples to a lab to get just an analysis like any other manure sample, or do you have to do anything else? Treat it differently in a way.
Yeah, so we actually have NIR algorithms that we've developed so we can do our NPK in-house, and we do that real time as we're producing our products. And then obviously we work with the standard external labs to do fertilizer panels for regulatory registrations and things like that. So really we do the external testing when we're required to for regulatory standards. We do the internal testing on every batch that we make. So we're sure, again, that we don't have, I would say we're much more consistent, 6 years into commercialization than we were the first year of operation, but really trying to pay attention batch over batch to make sure we've got something that's going to meet our expectations and provide the response criteria we're expecting.
May I ask a follow-up? Liz, do you have to work with state chemists? Do you have to work with the state labs?
I don't think so, but I'm not the best person to answer that. I have to ask our regulatory folks. I don't think so though. I think we're submitting our data when we do product registration or if there's a request. And certainly the state of Kentucky comes out and does inspections and will take product and test and make sure it's, meeting the regulatory standards or the tag guarantees we've provided.
So as long as the lab's certified, those results most likely would be used. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess, do the panelists have any other questions or things you'd like to share with this audience?
It is a new industry and it's huge opportunities. And I think what's being proposed or what you're seeing done, so it's more of a statement, I should say. What
It's
you're
perfect.
seeing done applies in your state. It's huge opportunities. I think the resources here are tremendous with Liz, Amanda, et cetera. I think finding the right people that want to do it is important. But I do think this is the upside is tremendous, and I think it's wide open at this point.